Your brain grew faster in your first 3 years than at any other point in your life. Researchers have found an infant's brain can form more than 1 million new connections every single second. That growth follows a simple rule. Connections you use get stronger, and the ones you don't get quietly deleted. Scientists call this synaptic pruning, and it shapes your brain around your actual environment. A child raised around warmth ends up with a brain built for connection. A child raised around chaos ends up with a brain built for survival. Neither brain is broken. They're both doing exactly what they were trained to do. Psychiatrist Bruce Perry has written about how the brain develops in a specific order, starting with basic survival functions and building upward from there. Early stress can shape the foundation everything else gets built on. This is part of why two people can get the exact same stressful email and react completely differently. One shrugs it off. The other spirals. Their alarm systems were calibrated years apart in different childhoods. Psychologists have a term for these deep assumptions: internal working models. Think of them as background programs running underneath your conscious thoughts, shaping how you expect people to treat you. Here's the part worth sitting with. Your most automatic reactions probably aren't character flaws. They're adaptations that once made sense. And that's what makes them something you can work with. Back in the 1950s, a British psychiatrist named John Bowlby proposed something that felt radical at the time. He said a child's bond with their caregiver isn't just emotional comfort, it's a survival system, as basic as hunger. His colleague Mary Ainsworth tested that idea with what's now called the strange situation study. She watched how infants reacted when their mother briefly left the room, and the reactions fell into distinct patterns. Kids who grew up trusting that people would come back tend to become adults who communicate directly and bounce back from conflict a little faster. Researchers often call this secure attachment. Other kids grew up with care that was sometimes warm and sometimes missing. As adults, they can crave closeness while constantly worrying the other person is about to leave. And some kids learned early on that expressing a need led to rejection. So they grew into adults who feel safer being independent and a little uneasy when things get too close. Psychologist Edward Tronick showed just how fast this wiring forms. In his still face experiment, a mother held a blank expression for only 2 minutes, and her infant showed real distress, desperately trying to reconnect. Long-term research has even found that how a baby was attached at 12 months old can predict patterns in their relationships decades later. The pattern starts early. But, as we'll get into later, it isn't fixed forever. In the mid-1990s, Dr. Vincent Felitti worked with the CDC to survey more than 17,000 adults. They asked about 10 categories of difficult childhood experiences, things like neglect, abuse, or growing up around addiction. What they found surprised a lot of people. Nearly 2/3 of participants had experienced at least one of these adversities. And the more of them a person had, the harder their adult outcomes tended to be. People with 4 or more of these experiences were roughly twice as likely to develop heart disease. They also showed a much higher likelihood of struggling with depression or substance use later in life. In the most severe cases, people with 6 or more of these experiences lived nearly 20 years less than people with none. Not from bad luck, but from what chronic stress does to the body over time. Researchers call this toxic stress. When stress hormones stay switched on for too long, they can inflame tissue, disrupt the immune system, and reshape how the body responds to pressure. Psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk has written about how the body can hold on to difficult experiences long after the mind has moved on. It can show up as tension, gut issues, or a nervous system that stays on alert. But here's the important part. These experiences shift the odds. They don't decide the outcome. Research has found that even one steady, caring adult can change a child's entire trajectory. Nobody sits a child down and teaches them how to handle anger or sadness. Instead, kids absorb the rules by simply watching how the adults around them deal with their own emotions. Psychologist Albert Bandura's well-known experiments showed that children copy the behavior they see even without being told to. Watching someone turns out to be one of the most powerful ways we learn. If your feelings were met with comfort growing up, you likely learned that emotions are useful information. If they were met with punishment or dismissal, you may have learned that feelings are something to hide. Researcher John Gottman calls the healthier version emotion coaching. Parents who name and guide a child's feelings tend to raise kids with stronger emotional skills and better friendships down the line. Kids from more emotionally dismissive homes can grow into adults who genuinely struggle to name what they're feeling. It often just looks like numbness, irritability, or always saying you're simply tired. Families also tend to hand out roles early on. The responsible one, the peacemaker, the achiever. A lot of adults keep playing that same role at work or in their relationships without realizing when it got assigned. This is part of why self-awareness can feel like digging something up. You're not discovering brand new emotions. You're uncovering ones that got buried a long time ago because they weren't safe to show. Two siblings can grow up in the exact same house and turn into completely different people. The science behind that is called gene-environment interaction, and it explains why childhood doesn't stamp everyone the same way. Decades of twin studies suggest personality is somewhere around 40 to 50% heritable. That leaves a large share of who you become shaped by experience and environment. Researcher Michael Meany's studies on rats found that high-nurturing mothers could actually change how stress genes were expressed in their pups. The nurtured pups stayed calmer for the rest of their lives. Psychologist Thomas Boyce describes some kids as dandelions, resilient almost anywhere they land. Other kids are orchids, more sensitive to their surroundings, who can struggle in harsh environments, but truly thrive in supportive ones. That's part of why the same difficult childhood can deeply affect one child and barely touch another. It isn't about willpower. It's about a sensitivity neither child chose. The Bucharest Early Intervention Project followed children raised in Romanian orphanages. Kids placed with foster families before age 2 largely recovered cognitively, while those placed later showed longer-lasting effects. Even so, that same study found real signs of recovery at every age it looked at. Early experience can set the odds, but on its own, it never really writes the ending. Here's maybe the most hopeful part of all this. The adult brain can still form new pathways throughout life. Whatever wiring childhood gave you, it's a starting point, not a life sentence. Attachment researchers have found something they call earned secure attachment. It describes adults from difficult childhoods who built real security later through healthy relationships, therapy, or honest self-reflection. What seems to matter most isn't having a painless past. It's being able to tell a coherent story about it. Psychiatrist Dan Siegel's work suggests that making sense of your history can genuinely change how it affects you. The Harvard study of adult development has followed people for over 85 years. Its clearest finding is that the quality of your relationships is the strongest predictor of long-term health and happiness. Approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, and mindfulness have all shown, in clinical research, that they can loosen the grip early experiences have on how you function today. Even small daily habits help. Simply naming an emotion can calm the brain's stress response, something researcher Matthew Lieberman calls affect labeling. Basically, name it to tame it. So, here's the paradox worth sitting with. You didn't choose the childhood that shaped you, but you're the only person who gets to decide what happens with that shape from here. If any part of this connected some dots for you, drop a comment and tell us which block hit the hardest. Your story might be exactly what another viewer needs to read today. And if someone in your life is still carrying weight from their early years without realizing it, send this video their way. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can give someone is a new way to understand themselves. If this kind of content is useful to you, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. This channel is built around real research, not quick fixes or empty advice.